Hello friends, it is January 22nd and I'm here to do a reading update. The last time I talked about what I was reading, I was a little bit into Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. Happy to report I am now over halfway through that book and I'm really enjoying it. It really has the hallmarks of a lot of what most people would probably identify as classic fantasy. There's a lot of those tropes and the kind of character archetypes. Even the way it's written kind of reminds me of other things that in my mind fit like this very classic style of fantasy, but I'm really enjoying it. The entire story centers around two friends, Aram and Marcus. There are also a couple of other characters, but really Aram and Marcus are the main focus. They come from the same village, but Aram is special in a very specific way that has to do with the world's lore and the magic. Marcus is also special in his own way. These two they go through a lot, okay? This book does do one thing that I'm not always overly fond of, and that is there are lots of time skips. I actually don't mind it so much in this book, and I think it's just because of the genre it's in. Maybe my brain is just preconditioned to be like, this is fine, it works for this book. The other things I'm enjoying about it are I think the world is so interesting, like the way she set up the world's lore and also the magic is so intriguing to me, and I really like what she's done with it. I also really love that dragons are a big part of the story. Obviously the title is Dragon Mage, so we knew they were coming in at some point, but they've actually come in to play a little bit more now. It has considerably picked up because the beginning was a little bit on the slower side because there was a lot of setup, but now that we're sort of getting into the meat of it and we're watching them face a lot of trials and grow up and all of these things, it's getting even more compelling and it's reading a lot faster for me now, which is how I've made it over the halfway mark at this point. However, tonight's reading is going to be interrupted by something that came in the mail today, which I'm super excited about, and that is the 8th volume of Solo Leveling. I'm so excited to get this, and also this cover is fantastic. It's just so good. The story is about this guy. He, at the very beginning of the series, is considered a very inept hunter. He has the ability to go into these other worlds and fight the creatures there, but his rank is super low and he often ends up needing to be healed instead of being able to contribute anything. And that means his career as a hunter is not going very well. Everything gets turned on its head when there's a system that becomes a part of his life that allows him to level up and get stronger and stronger and stronger. And we've just seen him continue to take advantage of that going forward into the series, as well as finding out more about the world and the obstacles and the enemies that everyone faces. It's been so good so far, and I'm immediately diving into this one. Like, sorry to my currently reading in my TBR, but this is where it's at. Page 60? Already screaming. I'm screaming both on behalf of a character who I'm like frustrated for, and I'm also screaming at a character who is being super oblivious right now, and I'm like, dude! I literally may have just found my favorite panels in all of Solo Leveling. Because I turned the page, I saw this happening, I screamed a little because reasons. I can't. It is January 26th today. Don't mind the sounds in the background. Once again, I am running laundry because it's a Friday and Friday is laundry day. From the last couple of clips, you guys probably know I finished reading the 8th volume of Solo Leveling and it was fantastic. I am thoroughly enjoying that series. Mackie has gone ahead and read the whole thing already. He has committed himself to collecting everything, which is a good sign for me because he's really picky about what he chooses to collect. He wants to collect everything Solo Leveling, which is exciting for me because I have a feeling that I'm gonna feel the same way. It's so enjoyable for what it is, and I am having so much fun with that. The other thing that I've been reading is Dragon Mage. I'm actually at the 85% mark of it now. It's really picked up in terms of what is happening to Aram and to Marcus in the books. I don't know that I would call it like an all-time favorite, although I can appreciate all of the interesting things that it's woven together. I kind of wish I had more of a connection to either Marcus or Aram. I can sympathize with the things that they've both been through and things they've had to endure, and obviously I'm rooting for them to succeed at what they're trying to succeed at, but other than that, like, I don't feel as strongly for them as I have for other characters in the past. But I should be finishing that one this weekend. It is February 2nd, so we've actually shifted months now. To be honest, I've been really terrible about checking it. It's funny because I've been enjoying everything that I've been reading so much, but it's just been a time. Last Friday, I was saying that I hadn't yet finished Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer, which was my buddy read with Danica for January. I did finish it on Saturday, and it was really good. I enjoyed the plot a lot, and the magic and the lore. I think those were the strongest parts of the story for me, just because I was really invested in seeing how things would play out and how all of these pieces would come together by the end. I like the characters a lot too, don't get me wrong. I wasn't as personally connected to them as I would have liked to be, even though I could objectively root for them as a reader. It was really fun to experience that book. I mean, it was really long and I was worried that it would feel long. It didn't. It was enjoyable, honestly. I did have feelings about the ending because I thought it was really solid, but I also felt like the climactic thing that happened felt a little bit too rushed. Overall, it was really good. A great first buddy read for the year, honestly, and I'm looking forward to the rest of them. Then I finished the entirety of The Frontrunner by Elsie Silver. That's the third book in the Gold Rush Ranch series, and I really liked it. At the beginning of it, I was a little bit unsure how I was gonna feel just because it had a lighter tone, but it just won me over in the end, which I should not have been surprised because I knew I was going to really like Elsie Silver's writing, and I did, and I really enjoyed the characters and being back amidst the Gold Rush Ranch cast. The difference for me between the first two books in the series and this one is that in this one I had a clear preference of which character I liked more in the main couple, and it was the hero. Oh my gosh, I did not expect to really like the hero in this book, Stefan Dalka, and if you've read the series you'll probably know why, but I just have a weakness for guys who just really are really into the women they love. Yeah, so I quite enjoyed that. Also, he's a big brother. I really enjoyed that. I like the way that their relationship built up as well. I thought that was really fun. The other plots in the book were good, but I feel like I was more emotionally invested in the ones in the first and second books. I also really enjoyed Mira, by the way. She's not my favorite of the heroines, but I did like her a lot. Really, at the end of the day, all I can tell you is that the Gold Rush Ranch series by Elsie Silver is so good. I have enjoyed every single book I've read so far. I just really had a good time. Right after I finished House of Flame and Shadow, I didn't feel like moving on to another new release or a new to me book. So what I ended up doing was I picked up my omnibus edition of Fushigi Yugi, the first volume, which I have never read the manga for that series. I've only ever seen it as an anime, so experiencing it through the manga is something new to me. Each big omnibus edition has 3 volumes in it, and I've actually made it past 2 volumes already. It's funny because I'm actually also rewatching the anime because my friend Yana has never seen it, so we've been watching it from the start. Where I'm at right now in the manga is part and parcel of like where we were when we were watching the anime. I'm just having a grand old time. It's been pretty fun to experience it, and like to note that there are still subtle changes. I think they did a pretty good job adapting it for an anime, but they condensed certain things and took out certain things, or at least it feels that way to be. In the book so far, I actually feel like there's more foundation for Yui and Miyaka's friendship. This is one of those like properties where I can criticize it, but at the end of the day, it's like one of the things I love most in the world, and it was super formational for me. There's also like how much knowledge her brother Keisuke has and that Yui has regarding the connection between the universe of the Four Gods and the real world. They have a better idea of what that is from the start. There's still some things about it where I'm kind of like, oof, that's not, I don't like the way that's translated or how that's handled. And I know that it's probably partly because it's a product of its time. It's still quite enjoyable for me because I already knew those things were coming because the anime kind of has them as well. I also am really enjoying experiencing Yuatase's style for the story. It's clear that she really had fun and worked really hard to get it to where it was. So yeah, I'm hoping to finish the 3rd volume of that tonight or tomorrow, maybe. I am also rereading XOXO by Axio. I technically didn't have to do that before reading the new release that's connected to it, but I just felt like it, and I'm like 34% in at this point. I have to tell y'all, I am loving it. I had already really liked it the first time, but experiencing it all over again is still like so fun for me. And it's also cemented the fact that like I never could pick a bias for XOXO because I really love the boys in that group. Like I do, I genuinely love all of them and I would love to be their friend. However, this reread is just cementing the fact that Nathaniel is definitely my bias. Like I have been a Nathaniel stan since 2021. So you know what? It just gets me so hyped for the next one. So I am excited to keep going with that one as well. Also, I'm dog sitting, so look who I have for company. A sleepy boy. It is February 13th, which is my littlest sister's birthday. I am lucky enough today to be able to work from home. We're having quite the snow day. I have actually managed to finish 3 things since I finished House of Flame and Shadow. The first of which was the first omnibus edition of Fushigi Yugi. This is volumes 1 to 3. Fushigi Yugi is something that I mentioned before in a lot of my online spaces because I absolutely loved the anime for this. It's one of the earliest shoujo isekai anime that I ever got to watch with a fantasy bent. In many ways, it's influenced the things I love in anime that I watch now, and manga I read now, and even in stories I read now. And just revisiting it in this different format is a lot of fun. There are a lot of elements in this one that I really enjoy seeing on the page, and I loved Yugata's art style. There are still things about this story that obviously haven't aged very well, and I still don't like how they come across. It was a little hard to read this because it's just so chunky, but man, it's also convenient to store on the shelf because there's only 6 volumes. I'm really hoping to be able to finish the entire series this month, but I'm not entirely sure because that is a lot of pages. Each volume is like 600 pages long. The other bonus thing about getting to read the manga is also seeing like Yugata's thought process and her notes and her reactions. That's really fun as well. And of course, I just love hanging out with these characters again and watching this story unfold. For our family book club this month, my sister Mel picked The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts, which is by Gary Chapman. I had read this book like ages ago when I was still living in the Philippines, and I do remember The 5 Love Languages pretty clearly, but it was nice to revisit this and get reminded of the reasons why it is important to communicate in the love language of your partner or of the person that you're trying to maintain a relationship with. While this definitely heavily focuses on couples and especially married couples, I do think that it is something that you can apply to any relationship you have, just knowing the love language of the person and trying to speak it, and also making it clear, understanding the love language that you need in order to have your love tank filled. It was interesting revisiting this one, and I'm sure that it's going to create an interesting discussion base for us because 2 of us are reading the version for married couples because we're married, and the other 2 are reading the version for singles because they're single, and I'm curious to see what the difference between those 2 things would be. Man, I'm doing a lot of rereading lately. The next book I actually finished rereading yesterday. Such a delight. That book is XOXO by Axio, and it was wonderful. It was just so nice to dive into a story that I already knew I loved and to have it hold up so well. I love the premise of this one. I enjoyed getting to know the characters again. I enjoyed getting to hang out with them again and just falling in love with the story and this world that Axio has brought to life with her words. I did top it up a bit this time. I also reread it because I started reading the sequel ASAP, which is about 2 characters that I really adored in the first book, Nathaniel and Sori. Ever since I had read like an early review copy of the first, I'd already mentioned to Axie that I would love to read a story about Nathaniel and Sori because I love them and their dynamic so much. I'm like halfway through this one already. I started it this morning and like I have tapped so much. I have tapped so much because like I just cannot get enough of their interactions. There's just something yummy about the dynamic that they have because they're friends, but they also clearly are interested in each other. And there's all these things making it so complicated for them to be together. I'm really excited just to see things keep moving forward, but at the same time, like I'm terrified because like I just don't want either of them to get hurt. I just don't want anyone to get hurt. It's been really good so far and I'm really enjoying my time with it. I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna keep flying through this one because I like have half a book left and I desperately need to know how things end up for these 2. I'm also lastly and just quickly rereading Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I'm listening to this one on audio, probably gonna not be doing much of that today since I'm at home and can read a physical book. It's been surprisingly fun so far despite the fact that this book is heavy in some ways because, you know, Selena is going through quite a few things and has quite a few feelings. Everyone else is too, actually. There's a lot of secrets and a lot of difficult feelings that everyone is trying to work through. And this is the beginning of when all of the strings are coming together and you're getting to see how this story is weaving forward with the characters we know and love, but also a new series of characters that make an appearance. I'm having a good time. I'm almost halfway through this one. I'm just 1% short of the 50% mark, but I have no doubt that I'll probably finish my audio reread by the end of the week, and then I'll be able to start my next Sarah J. Maas reread, which will obviously be Queen of Shadows. And that's really all I've got in terms of updates right now. I'll probably update you again when I'm finished with this one because I have a feeling I will be finished with this one today. Oh, yes. And my other thing, it's so funny. So when I read the first book, I was like, okay, I love Jenny and Jae-woo, but I also would need Nathaniel and Sori's story. And now that I'm reading this one, I'm like, but could you also write Sun's story now? Because I kind of need a romance with Sun in it. Does anyone want to give me that Axie, please? Thank you. So I think the last time I did an update, I was still in the middle of reading ASAP by Axio. I actually ended up finishing this one in the same day that I started it, just because I was like so drawn into the story. I loved spending more time with Sori in particular because we do meet her in XOXO, but we get to know her even better in ASAP and sort of understand her background, her history, where she's coming from. And I like that we get sort of a coming of age story for her where she has been pursuing something that she's dreamed about since she was really young, and then she realized that maybe it's not the life that she wants and she's exploring other options. I like the bits of celebrity that come into this one, and of course I loved seeing characters I loved from the first book. I especially love getting to hang out with the members of XOXO a bit, especially Nathaniel, who has always been my favorite. I have been waiting for Nathaniel and Sori's story since we first meet them and get an inkling that there is some history there, and just seeing it all unfold on these pages was so good. There were so many very deliciously swoony, wonderful emotional moments, and I live for that. I just love Nathaniel, okay? I really, really love him. Like, he's everything. This one was super easy to read and super compelling, and I was just like in it from start to end, right? And now I want another member of XOXO's story, specifically Sun. I would love to read his book. It doesn't have to be a YA book. I actually think it would fare really well as an adult rom-com. Axie, if you ever see this, that is what I want. This was such a good time, and I am so glad that I was finally able to read it, and I adored it and highly recommend. In the same day that I read ASAP, I actually ended up reading, also from start to end, A False Start by Elsie Silver, which is the last book in the Gold Rush Ranch series, and it was so good. A False Start is about Nadia Dalka. She is the sister of Stefan, who is the hero of the third book. Her romance is with Griffin Sinclair, who is her brother's best friend, and he's also someone we've seen in the other books. There's a significant age gap between them. Both have some history that they need to work with, some traumatic history that they need to work through. I knew I was going to enjoy it because I've enjoyed every other book in the Gold Rush Ranch series. I don't think I expected to love it as much as I did and to get as emotionally invested in their story as I did. I really liked getting to spend time with both Nadia and Griffin. Nadia, I think, was easier for me to like right away because she's already at a point in her life where she is facing down those things in her past that defined her for so long and trying to carve out her own path, and she's really worked on herself and continues to work on herself in this one, and she knows what she wants and she's trying to go after it. Griffin is a little bit harder, or was a little bit harder at first for me to get into because he doesn't talk much. There's a reason for that. And he's a little bit more like the type who plays his cards close to his chest. But once we get more of an idea of who he is and how he is in a relationship as well, it was just delightful. I loved watching these two fall in love. I loved seeing their relationship grow and shift and change, and how they dealt with the obstacles, both individual and as a couple, that they had to face. I also really enjoyed getting to see the other people from the Gold Rush Ranch saga around. It was so good. I'm so happy to finally have finished the series, and if you only know Elsie from her Chestnut Spring series, I think the series is actually quite underrated. You should definitely check it out. Today, while I was working, I finally finished listening to Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. Arguably, for me, one of the best books in the entire Throne of Glass series. There's just something so definitive about it. It really bookends the story. It kind of ends what we thought the story was to begin with and opens it up entirely into something bigger and newer and much more vast, and I really enjoyed that. Despite the fact that there are not a lot of comforting things that happen in this book, in fact, there are a lot of traumatic things and difficult things, I still find comfort rereading it, and I still find myself like swept up in the story every single time and just always finding new things to like pinpoint or new perspectives to take. It's a good time. And I'm currently reading I'm about a third of the way through The Warm Hands of Ghost, which is by Catherine Arden. This is historical fiction set during around World War I. It's got a bit of a speculative element to it, I believe, though I haven't quite encountered it as much as I would like. The story currently revolves around two main perspectives. There's Laura, who ends up going back to the war front from where she was in Canada in order to find out what happened to her brother. And the other perspective is from her younger brother, Freddie, a couple of months prior to Laura's perspective, mind you. He wakes up and he finds himself in the company of someone who should be his enemy, but instead they are working together in order to stay alive. The one thing I will say about this is, like, immediately I found the writing arresting, and that's not surprising because I have always thought that Catherine Arden has this very particular way of writing and expressing things and telling stories that makes her books feel rather refreshing and unique, and I think that's true of this one. I did have to adjust a little bit just because I don't read a lot of historical fiction, not even in a fantasy sense. Once I had myself prepped in my mind for the genre, like it started flowing a lot smoother, and I've been reading it surprisingly fast, all things considered. I honestly have no idea where it's going. I really want Laura to be reunited with her brother and her brother to be reunited with her, but I don't see how that could happen. I also am trying to understand why the choice was to have these two narratives from two different time periods as well. I'm curious to see how this is going to culminate in the end. It's Friday, February 16th. I actually meant to finish reading The Warm Hands of Ghosts yesterday so that I could wrap up this vlog, but I did not get to do that. I am about 100 pages from the end, and it's getting really good. I love when stories get to the point where if you have two different narratives going on where they start weaving together or at least having parallels, and that's certainly what's happening right now with this book. One of the things that I have a comment on, or have commented on since the beginning of, is that Catherine Arden's writing is just so arresting, and it's just drawing me further and further into this story. I like the way the speculative elements are getting woven into it because it's a little more subtle than what I would usually go for. Like, I usually read a lot of fantasy that is just like epic high fantasy or urban fantasy that where like the elements are really clear. This one, it's woven in between things, and you're never quite sure if it's a real thing or if it's not a real thing. And I like that the speculative element kind of accounts for gaps in things, right? Like, it's written to fill those gaps and to make things seem like they could be real or true. And I really enjoy that a lot. And I'm curious to see how this is all gonna end, because like at this point we've come to the part of the story where things are starting to intersect. Like, things from one narrative are bleeding into the other narrative, and hopefully they will eventually line up in me. I think I could finish this morning, which I'm gonna try and do. While I'm waiting for things to download and emails to come, I'm gonna try and do that, and then I'll report back when I'm done. The dryer is still going, but I figured I'd come back because I have finished reading The Warm Hands of Ghosts, so this will probably be the last clip of this vlog. I like this one a lot. It made me really sad. I finished it, and like my first thought was like, this book has made me feel so melancholy and so sad, and it makes sense because it's set during the Great War. It's set during this particular incident, which I actually don't really know that much about, to be honest with you. From what I've heard and what is in the note in this one, it seems like Catherine Arden did a lot of research on that particular time period. As the story progresses, the way that she's woven in the speculative element in the gaps of what we know from history and from firsthand accounts and from all of these things is really fascinating to me. There's so much possibility and potential for it, but it's also really hard to do in a way that makes it feel like it makes sense. The war itself was something that felt so apocalyptic in so many ways, just because of all the death and pain and suffering and grief that brought, whether it was to people on the front or people working just close to it or people with, you know, almost everyone had someone involved in that war. And her storytelling and her prose just work quite well. I feel like I need more time to fully give you all my thoughts of it, but at the end of the day, this is a story that so creatively and honestly, in terms of the emotional threads that were woven through it, explored different aspects of how people who were part of this war and peripheral to it were affected by it, and how what potentially looks like a hellscape, what if it actually did have an actual hellscape and an actual devil there. And it was really fascinating, and I was just so swept up in it. At the beginning when I started this, I had no idea how things were gonna come together and play out, and by the time we hit the ending, it all just fell into place, and I will definitely give Catherine Arden props for that. Do I necessarily love this book as much as I loved her Winter Night trilogy? No, just because this is not really actually normally my cup of tea, and I only really picked it up because she was the author for it. But I do think what she's done here is some very heartfelt and clever and creative storytelling. It's a feat, I think, to weave history and something speculative in a way that just feels like it all comes together in this story that you ultimately can't set down at some point, or at least that's how it was for me. I did end up enjoying the time I spent with this. Well, enjoying might not be the right word because there was a lot of sad stuff and hard stuff to read in here. I did find myself finishing this one feeling like really emotionally impacted by what I had read, but also in awe of the way that the story was woven together. I do feel like there were some elements that maybe could have used a little bit more development. Like, I know the romance aspects of this story were not obviously the main focus of it. We're really focusing more on the experience of war. And we're really looking at that and at ghosts and what haunts you and how the wars would affect you. But there is an aspect of romance in this. At that part, I was just like, okay, I could sort of accept it, but I also feel like we maybe had needed a little more time with that for it to feel more effective for me. But overall, this book, I thought it was really good. I'm curious to see what Catherine has in store for us next. So I'm finally gonna end this vlog here. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I know it was a bit all over the place, because if you want to, please like and subscribe and come back to watch more videos as I upload them on the channel, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!